The devastation is unlike anything I've seen before. On my many visits to Gaza, I've seen a lot of destruction, but never like this. No one is untouched. So many families have been destroyed. People are quite simply desperate. They're still in shock at what has happened and have so little hope for the future.
Finally, we met Khaled Abed Rabo. His mother, his wife and his 3 daughters were ordered out of their house by Israeli soldiers. Outside were 3 Israeli tanks. A soldier in one of them opened fire on the family group. 2-year-old Amal was shot 9 times. 7-year-old Suad was shot 12 times. Both children died.
يعني أنا بفضل لو الجيش الإسرائيلي أدمني أنا ولا قتل أطفالي قدامي، يعني يعني خلاني أتحسر وأشوف أطفالي يموتوا قدامي، يعني أنا مش مثال الثواب. أنا بناشد منظمة حقوق الإنسان، بناشد الصليب الأحمر، بناشد الأمم المتحدة، بناشد العالم الحر، كل واحد عنده ضمير حي في العالم إنه يتطلع لقضيتنا بشكل إنساني، قضية أطفال.
Months later, the international community has failed spectacularly. There has been no investigation of war crimes, no justice. At best, a trickle of humanitarian aid gets into Gaza, and there is little prospect for reconstruction. What's needed is for the blockade of Gaza to be lifted, for war crimes to be investigated, and for those responsible to be brought to justice.
The death toll has now reached over 4,200 people in the Gaza Strip, over 1.2 million people displaced, and approximately 14,000 people injured in the latest battle that has taken place, including an egregious bombing of a hospital, Biden's visit to the Middle East, protests sparks rage worldwide, and this is the latest news. So yesterday there was a terrible tragedy of sorts. Just awful that it's alleged that the Israeli military has bombed a Palestinian hospital, which was later blamed on Hamas. And I'll just read the article. And of course, like everything I'm reading here, I will have in the description for you. At least 500 people have been killed so far. Death toll is rising there. In an Israeli air attack on the Al-Ahli Arab Hospital in the besieged Gaza Strip, Palestinian officials have said. The health ministry in Gaza said the blast at the hospital was caused by an Israeli air raid. Israel has attributed the explosion to a misfired rocket launched by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad armed group. PIJ has denied the allegation. One of Israel's ministers, military ministers, later posted on Twitter about an alleged discussion between Hamas operatives discussing the attacks. However, there's a problem with this. It's coming from the Israeli military. So we have to put some pause on this. And also, we don't know who's speaking. And thirdly, the Arabic is poor. Yesterday, there was a tweet by an Israeli minister that actually said the attack on the hospital happened by the Israeli military, but he deleted it. Al Jazeera was not able to independently verify the accounts. The health ministry in Gaza said at least 500 people were killed in the blast, by far the highest death toll of any single incident in Gaza during the current war between Israel and Hamas. The ministry said hundreds of other victims remained under the rubble. Hamas said the blast mostly killed displaced people. Palestinian Authorities Health Minister Mai Akalia accused Israel of carrying out a massacre. Located in central Gaza, the hospital, which is run by the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem, was struck while it was overwhelmed with thousands of Palestinians seeking shelter amid a campaign of brutal Israeli air attacks across much of the besieged Gaza Strip. And what I want to talk to you about is this incident, which has caught on a lot of misinformation, disinformation, even outright false reports. There is a video that I do want to play. It's a video of a JDAM missile. JDAM missiles made in the United States are called Joint Direct Attack Missile. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a comparison video. And this is a I saw this yesterday. I said, you know what? It's the sound I want to concentrate on. Hamas rockets don't have this precision whistling sound that you're going to hear. And I looked everywhere on Twitter. I looked on archive.org. And you make the judgment for yourself. Now remember, JDAM missiles are given to Israel for precision strikes on buildings that are targeted because they're Hamas affiliated. So here's a video, right? And listen, just listen. Not so much as the look, but listen.
Bombs away.
That's the hospital. That's the first known video of the hospital. Right? Should I play it again? I'll play it one more time without me in the way.
Bombs away.
That's the first thing that caught my ear. I was like, well, that's very similar. Somebody on Twitter actually posted that. I said, well, that's very interesting. Now, let's talk about history here, right? Does Israel have a history of bombing medical facilities, public buildings? Well, I went back and not read the whole report, but found a 2009 Amnesty International report, which was during Operation Cast Lead, which was the name of the Israel Defense Forces operation against Palestinian militants in Gaza. And this happened in 2009. What I want to read for you is a part of the report that goes to show you that they do indeed target medical facilities. The Israeli military does. Right? So indiscriminate attacks, white phosphorus. I'll blow it up one more time. Well, you can see it, right? During Operation Cast Lead, Israeli forces made extensive use of white phosphorus, which, if used as an incendiary on a civilian population, is against the International Criminal Court's considered a war crime. But if used as not an incendiary, it's not a war crime. Often launched from 155 millimeter artillery shells in residential areas, causing death and injuries to civilians, homes, schools, medical facilities, and United Nations buildings. All civilian objects took direct hits. This is a report about the Israeli military. White phosphorus is a weapon intended primarily as an obstructant to provide cover for troop movements on the battlefield. It does so by releasing a thick white smoke as it burns. It can be used to mark targets, to trace the path of bullets as an incendiary weapon. It can be dispersed by artillery shells, grenades, and rockets. All right? In addition to the indiscriminate effect of air bursting such a weapon, firing these shells as artillery exasperates the likelihood that civilians will be endangered. Until Operation Cast Lead, the Israeli army had stopped firing artillery into Gaza after a gruesome incident on November 8, 2006, in which 18 members of a family were killed in their homes by a barrage of artillery shells that struck several houses in Beit Hanun, seemingly by mistake. And I'll provide the report, of course, here. And it talks about how they specifically target residential homes, hospitals, schools, even a UN Relief and Workers Agency facility, as we'll read here. As with all United Nations Relief Workers Association facilities, the UN had made sure the Israeli army had the schools coordinated in order to minimize the likelihood that it would be attack and error. The United Nations Board of Inquiry, which investigated the attack, found that the undisputed cause was artillery firing by the IDF. Medical and humanitarian facilities affected. And they're using this on the UN Workers and Relief Workers Association. They're using this against civilian homes and hospitals. No, they're not going to get indicted or charged by any international court because they're not part of they're not co-signers of the International Criminal Court. What makes you think anybody's going to hold them accountable? United States don't got the backbone. They've been sold out. On the morning of January 15, 2009, several white phosphorus and high explosive artillery shells struck the United Nations Relief Workers Associated headquarters in the center of Gaza City, causing fires which destroyed tons of desperately needed humanitarian aid and medicines, as well as the workshops and warehouses. Some 700 civilian residents in nearby buildings have fled their homes and taken refuge in the compound earlier that morning. That didn't stop the Israeli military from attacking them. The United Nations Relief Workers Association head of the field operations in Gaza, John Ging, and other staff who were in the compound during it, told Amnesty International that they had started to telephone officials in the Israeli army earlier that morning as the area surrounding the compound was being shelled by Israeli forces. When Amnesty International delegates visited the compound 4 days after the attacks, fires were still burning in some of the warehouses. Here's a photo of a M155 white phosphorus shell made in the United States. Fragments of a U.S.-made M155 white phosphorus carrier artillery shell. And it's not like, look, this will stop the Israeli military from attacking medical facilities in the future. Because in the report, it stated that 22 medical facilities were destroyed, including Al-Quds Hospital, located in the Tal Al-Ahli neighborhood in the center of Gaza City, which was repeatedly struck from morning to night on January 15 by white phosphorus lumps, white phosphorus artillery shells, and tank shells, eventually forcing medical staff and patients to evacuate the facility. At the time, some 50 patients were receiving treatment at the hospital, and about 500 residents had sought shelter there from the bombardments and shelter and shelling in the area. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The two top floors of the main hospital building and the administration building adjacent to the hospital and connected to it by a bridge were virtually destroyed by fire caused by white phosphorus. The hospital pharmacy on the second floor was struck by at least one tank shell. Attempts by doctors and other hospital personnel, including visiting foreign doctors, to put the fire out, buckets of water and fire extinguishers, proved ineffective because firefighters and civil defense vehicles could not reach the hospital for more than an hour. And I'm just going to post the report for you to read. Second day of protests across the Middle East after Gaza hospital strike. And this caused hundreds of thousands of people around the world, maybe millions, to come out, say, hey, listen. Thousands of people have rallied in countries across the Middle East and North Africa to protest against a strike in a hospital in the Gaza Strip that killed nearly 500 people, according to Palestinian officials in the besieged enclave. Following calls for a day of rage, people in Lebanon, Jordan, Yemen, Egypt, Tunisia, and the occupied West Bank took to the streets on Wednesday to denounce the hit on the Al-Ahli Arab Hospital and express their solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. Hamas, the group running the besieged Gaza Strip, blamed Israel for the strike in the hospital. Israel has denied responsibility, claiming that a misdirected rocket fire by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad was responsible, even though they blamed Hamas. They can't even keep up with the lies. It's just amazing. Just like they lied about the report, this hospital strike in Al-Quds, they denied that too. In fact, Ehud Olmert, Prime Minister of Israel at the time, basically said later that, oh yeah, we attacked the hospital because Hamas was known to use it. And Hamas is everywhere. They're all over the place. It's the excuse. It's like anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism keeps using it until it's, you can't use it no more. Even the word and the meaning of anti-Semitism has no meaning to it no more because they used it so much. And what happens when real acts of anti-Semitism happen? No one's going to believe them. Because what's going to happen in the future is that there's going to be prejudicial attacks on Israelis and Jews all around the world. This will give credence, allowance for anti-Jews to attack Jews maliciously. These are the people that we don't want. We don't want them representing the peace protests, but they will be. Wednesday, thousands of people gathered outside the U.S. and Israeli embassies in Amman, Jordan. Islamic parties in the countries called for a general strike, while the Jordanian government declared 3 days of mourning. And what does this mean about Biden's visit and basic aid that were coming out of Egypt, like I said in the previous video? Well, Israel agrees to allow basic aid into stricken Gaza Strip after Joe Biden visit. And that's because the United States forced this issue. Israel said on Wednesday it would allow basic humanitarian aid from Egypt into Gaza Strip as it hosted U.S. President Joe Biden the day after a deadly blast at Gaza hospital. So when Biden leaves, I'd like to know the response of the Israeli government and its military. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office responded to Biden's call for emergency aid to be let through by announcing it would not prevent the delivery of food, water, and medicine to the south of the besieged territory. Question is, how are they going to get it to Gaza City? I don't think there's anybody get in there now. The U.S. president had earlier joined Israel in blaming the hospital explosion on a misfire rocket by Palestinian militants. Of course. Biden also said he would ask Congress for an unprecedented support package for Israel's defense. We already give them defense. Keep that War Department going, right? Make sure. While calling on the country not to be consumed by rage over the bloody October 7th attack that started the war. In light of President Biden's request, Israel will not prevent humanitarian assistance from Egypt as long as it's only food, water, and medicine for the civilian population located in the southern Gaza Strip, for those evacuating there, and as long as these supplies do not reach Hamas. How do you know? Right? And since you're already blaming the Palestinian citizenry for being Hamas everywhere, how do we know they'll get these goods? The war between Israel and the Palestinian group Hamas has already spilled into a wider region. This is what we got to talk about, right? And risk expanding further while Tehran, capital of Iran, backed an array of heavily armed groups. Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad are part of an Iran-backed alliance called the Axis of Resistance. Iran's Revolutionary Guards warned on October 17th of further action by Tehran's allies against Israel if it did not cease its attacks. Right? Hezbollah, meaning Party of God, was set up by Iran's Revolutionary Guards in 1982 with the aim of fighting Israel forces that invaded Lebanon. It has remained a sworn enemy of Israel, which sees the group as the biggest threat to its borders. What does this mean in the long run? Now, there are many scenarios this can go. This could just be the elimination of Hamas. This could be the displacement of the most densest area in all of Israel, Gaza Strip. This could be the displacement of Palestinians from Israel. This could be the reason to use this conflict as a wider regional war with Israel's preconceived enemies, which are the Shiite militias, Hezbollah, and by default, the countries that are supporting Hezbollah and the Palestinians, which are Iran, Syria, and Lebanon. Lebanon being north to Israel, in which Syria is the control nexus or the middle corridor between Iran and Hezbollah. Now, someone told me earlier, was this a land grab by Israel to displace 1.1 million people out of Gaza City? So, yeah, well, it's a stretch. But earlier today, just like prophecy, Israel's foreign minister, Eli Cohen, who I talked about in a previous video about what makes up Netanyahu's cabinet, said this on Twitter. I'll make myself disappear. Right? The foreign minister, Eli Cohen from the Likud, with Amber Vigil and whoever, quote, at the end of this war, not only will Hamas no longer be in Gaza, the territory of Gaza will also decrease, end quote. October 18th, 2023. The territory of Gaza will also decrease. In other words, he damn well knows that once Gaza City is free of Palestinians, they're going to make sure that this area shrinks, just like all Palestinian neighborhoods have shrunken since 1948. Right? Doesn't seem like a far-fetched after all. Now, in the next couple of days, when Biden stops visiting the Middle East, we'll find out whether the Israeli military, which has surrounded Gaza City, and I think it's now 480,000 reservists waiting to enter the city. We still have trapped people here that can't leave, hospitals still administering people, still sheltering people. And if anything, if what we see at the Al-Ahli Hospital is any precursor to the future, this will definitely ramp up attacks against Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, because that's who's going to enter this conflict. And I think another attack like this will certainly cause a reaction, which is what Israel wants, the government wants, because they want this war. That's not me saying it. Netanyahu's been saying this for the last 25 years. He said it at the United Nations Security Council a couple of years ago, where he had that stupid drawing of a bomb that he claimed that Iran was so close to obtaining a nuclear weapon. Said the same thing about Iraq in 2003. The United States basically took his word that Iraq and Al-Qaeda were working to procure chemical weapons. That's untrue. Why would you believe Netanyahu when he has a repetitive history of lying and conducting war crimes? For the same reason you don't believe Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad is the same reason you shouldn't believe Netanyahu. Neither side is telling the truth. And who's the real victim? The people. That's who. All right. That's it for the latest news today. As always, I'll always report without bias, without prejudice. And as the updates keep coming, I'll keep you informed. Good night, everybody.